All right, let's get into it. Today, we're going to break down one of the most influential and, let's be honest, controversial philosophies in all of history, Marxism.
For what? Over a century now, Karl Marx's ideas have been a total lightning rod. So is he a friend of the worker or a failed prophet whose theories led to disaster? That's the big question, right? We're going to unpack the core ideas so you can start to form your own opinion.
So, here's our game plan for today. We'll kick things off with the core philosophy, then we'll dive into the class conflict that's so central to it. After that, we'll look at the human cost of capitalism according to Marx, his big predictions for the future, and, finally, the legacy of his ideas.
Okay, first up, a quick intro. At its heart, Marxism isn't just some dry economic theory. It's way bigger than that. It's a whole worldview, a social, political, and economic philosophy designed to put society under a microscope, especially capitalism.
Now, to really get a handle on Marxism, you can't just jump straight into the politics. Nope. You have to start at the very foundation, the cornerstone idea that Marx believed was the engine driving all of human history. And that idea is called historical materialism.
And this is the crucial part, so listen up. Marx basically flipped conventional thinking completely on its head. He said, look, it's not great leaders or big ideas or religion that shape history. For him, it was something much more, material. It was the economy, how we produce things and who owns the stuff we use to produce them. That is what really dictates the entire course of civilization.
And he had this really simple but powerful way of visualizing this. Think of society as a building. Down at the bottom, you've got the economic base. This is all the physical stuff, the factories, the land, the tools, and also the relationships between people, like owners and workers. Then everything else, everything. Our laws, our politics, our culture, even our art, that's all the superstructure. And it's all built on top of that economic base, basically to hold it up and make it seem normal and right.
This idea really helps you see Marx's view of history as this long, step-by-step progression. He saw humanity moving through these distinct economic stages, right? You start with a kind of primitive communism, then move to slavery, then feudalism, and then the big one he was living in, capitalism. And he argued that each stage would inevitably collapse and be replaced by the next one, all leading to a final stage he called communism.
Okay, so that's the base. Now let's talk about the conflict it creates. Because for Marx, this is the absolute heart of the story, the constant, never-ending struggle between social classes.
Yeah, for Marx, the entire story of human history is the story of class struggle. That's it. In every single era, you've got a dominant class that owns and controls everything, and an oppressed class that does all the work. Their interests are completely at odds, and that tension, that conflict, is what eventually boils over and pushes society into its next big stage.
So, under capitalism, this whole struggle really boils down to two main teams. On one side, you have the bourgeoisie. These are the owners. Their goal is super simple: make as much profit as possible. And on the other side, you've got the proletariat, the workers. All they own is their ability to work, and their goal is to get better wages and working conditions. And here's the kicker. According to Marx, those two goals can never, ever truly coexist.
But, a lot of the time, this struggle is just simmering under the surface. Marx believed a real revolution could only happen once the workers developed something he called class consciousness. Think of it as this collective aha moment. It's when they stop competing against each other for scraps and suddenly realize, hey, wait a minute, we're all in this together. They see they're a huge, unified group with the same problems and the same opponent.
So what does it actually feel like to be a worker in this system day in and day out? Well, it's not just about the money. Marx argued that capitalism inflicts this deep psychological wound on people, and he had a very specific name for that feeling: alienation.
He actually broke it down into 4 different types. First, you're alienated from the thing you make. You pour your effort into it, but you don't own it. Second, you're alienated from your own work. You're just following orders with no creative control. Third, capitalism alienates you from other workers, pitting you against each other instead of letting you cooperate. And finally, and maybe this is the saddest one, you're alienated from your own human potential. You're reduced from a creative person into just a cog in a machine.
All right, let's get right to the heart of it: profit. According to Marx, where does it really come from? Okay, let's make this super simple. Imagine a worker makes something that adds, say, $100 of value in one day. But does the worker get that $100? Of course not. They get paid a wage, right? Let's say their wage for that day is only 20 bucks.
So what happens to that other $80? Well, that is what Marx called surplus value. It's the difference between the value the worker creates and the wage they get paid. For Marx, this wasn't just a clever business model. This was exploitation, plain and simple. It was the hidden engine that powered the whole capitalist machine. So, when you put it all together, this system of exploitation, of alienation, Marx came to a pretty dramatic conclusion. He didn't just think capitalism was unfair, he thought it was fundamentally unstable, that it actually contained the seeds of its own destruction.
He argued that the system was full of these internal contradictions that would sooner or later cause it to collapse. Things like those boom and bust crises where we make way too much stuff, or the way wealth just keeps concentrating into fewer and fewer hands. And then there's the constant push to expand and find new markets, which he linked to imperialism. All this, he said, would just make the whole thing more and more unstable over time.
So what happens after the collapse? Well, he predicted a three-step transition. Step 1, a revolution, where the workers finally take control. Step 2, a temporary state. And this is a controversial term. He called the dictatorship of the proletariat. The idea was this state would reorganize society from the ground up. And then step 3, that state would wither away, giving rise to true communism, a society with no classes, no state, where everything is owned in common.
Okay, so let's be real. History did not play out exactly how Marx thought it would. The revolutions carried out in his name, well, they often led to brutal, totalitarian regimes that were a far cry from his vision of a classless utopia. But, and this is a big but, to just dismiss his ideas because of that would be a huge mistake. You'd be missing their incredible and ongoing influence on the world.
His work became a launchpad for so many other theories. Thinkers and leaders all over the globe took his ideas and ran with them, adapting them to their own situations. This is where you get things like Leninism in Russia, with its focus on a vanguard party to lead the revolution, or Maoism in China, which centered on the role of the peasantry. And then you have what's called Western Marxism, which started looking more at things like culture and ideology.
And that really brings us to the big, final question, doesn't it? Look, a lot of Marx's specific predictions didn't come true, and capitalism, for all its faults, has created a staggering amount of wealth. And yet, his core critiques about inequality, about exploitation, about feeling like a cog in a machine, don't those still sound familiar? They pop up all the time in our debates about the wealth gap, about workers' rights, about the power of corporations. So the question is, why? Why do these ideas, more than 150 years later, still resonate so strongly? And I think that question alone shows you just how deep an impact Marx still has on our world today.